And we're grateful, as always, to be joined by Oregon Senator Ron Wyden in our studio. Thanks for joining us, as always. Well, Senator, you just heard some of that talking about mail-in voting. You heard President Trump's comments. He's attacking mail-in voting, says contributes to voter fraud. Of course, Oregon, a proud supporter of mail-in ballots. In terms of how President Trump is arguing against it, is there an argument to be made for making it more uniform among states and for federal elections about how elections are conducted?
I don't think there's an argument for taking advice from Vladimir Putin, because Vladimir Putin knows virtually nothing about democracy. And I'll tell you a little bit of history. I was the first United States senator elected by mail, but Gordon Smith, a Republican, was the next. And Dennis Richardson, a legendary conservative from Southern Oregon, basically told Donald Trump when he inquired during his first term about it to go fly a kite, that he wasn't with it. So the reality is Oregon voters like it, and I'm going to have some town meetings over the next couple of days, and I'll be taking a citizens referendum, and I'm sure Oregon voters are going to say they're the ones who ought to make the choice and not follow the recommendations of Vladimir Putin.
I have to ask you, with the way that President Trump has conducted some of these issues in the first 7 months or so of his presidency, what's to say that he doesn't say, hey, there's an emergency, there's a federal emergency, I'm going to sign an emergency declaration and say we got to do elections the way I say because mail-in voting is fraudulent? What's to say he doesn't take that approach?
He can try, but the Constitution doesn't provide for kings. And certainly when we heard about some of the choices between the federal government and the states, the separation of powers, the law's on our side and it'll be upheld for vote by mail.
Now, Senator, President Trump working with Russia, Ukraine, as well as other European allies to end the war in Ukraine, which he says will involve Crimea permanently being recognized as a Russian territory and Ukraine not being allowed into NATO. Are you on board with those conditions in order to end the war?
We really haven't gotten any specifics about how you're going to actually keep the peace, how you're going to have the security guidelines, and is the Ukraine going to be part of NATO? All these kinds of questions go fundamentally to the rights of protecting the Ukrainians, and they've been very vague on it. He missed a huge opportunity last weekend. He said, I'm going to push for a ceasefire, and if I don't get a ceasefire, there are going to be consequences, and he batted 0 for 2 last weekend.
As we started off the newscast, Attorney General Pam Bondi last week sent a letter to various jurisdictions, including the state of Oregon, threatening to take legal action, possibly threatening cuts to federal funding if Oregon doesn't change some of its sanctuary policies and if Oregon doesn't assist with federal immigration efforts. Does the executive branch have that authority?
I don't believe they do. And historically, and we talked about the separation of powers with one of your earlier guests, but the reality is the Trump crowd believes in states' rights if they agree with what the state is doing. If they think the state is right, okay. So the point really is this is a separation of powers question. It always has been, and something like this is going to be left to the states.
And so in this case, in terms of sanctuary status, which Oregon has time and time again reiterated, Governor Kotek just today reiterated that we support our sanctuary policies. As a federal member of the government, you still support Oregon's sanctuary policies and saying, no, we won't assist.
I'm on the side of Oregon's local elected officials, and obviously Oregon's local elected officials want to step in if somebody, for example, has committed a violent crime. They're going to do that. They're going to find a way to use their own local authority.
Speaking of authority, Trump also federalizing the National Guard in Washington, D.C., and hinted at doing so in other cities around the country. What will be your response if Trump does put boots on the ground in Portland?
Again, this is a constitutional question where he's on the wrong side. There is no legal authority for that sort of thing, and Oregonians had the experience during his first term of what it was like. We said point blank, you know, peaceful protest, absolutely. Violence, none.
You're obviously on recess right now, and fortunate to have you here in Oregon and able to come into the studio, but you'll be heading back to Washington here in a couple weeks. How do you expect things to play out? It's so contentious, it feels like, between Democrats and Republicans, even somewhat within the own party. How do you expect this to play out? Is Congress able to get anything done.
Well, let me give you an example of where I'm working in a bipartisan way. I think these tariffs are just poison for our consumers and small businesses. They raise everybody's prices. Recently, Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, and I went to the floor to knock out the president's approach on these tariffs that are doing so much damage to the Oregon economy. We lost on a vote of 49 to 49. 2 senators were missing. I think they'll be back. I think our position will prevail and we'll get a smarter approach with respect to trade, which is so important for Oregon, where 1 out of 4 jobs revolves around international trade, and often those trade jobs pay better.
With things so close in Washington, you mentioned 49-49 in that case. We know the House is close, obviously the Senate fairly close as well. How much attention will you be putting on the 2026 midterms?
I think the best politics is to do your job. You know, people always ask me that, oh, let's look at a poll and all this kind of thing. The best politics is addressing the big issues right now. In Oregon, the big issues are the ones where the second word is bill. It might be medical bill, it might be housing bill, it might be energy bill. That's what folks are talking about. That's what I'm spending my time on.
All right. Well, Senator, thank you so much for
Thanks
joining
for
us
having
in the
me.
studio tonight.
All right, and tomorrow you will get a chance to hear from Senator Wyden's counterpart in Washington. Senator Jeff Merkley will join John Mayer on KVAL News at noon. Plus, Oregon Representative Val Hoyle will be in Eugene tomorrow, hosting a town hall at South Eugene High School. Doors open at 5, and the event gets underway at 6 p.m. We are planning to cover this event as you take your concerns to your representatives. Meanwhile, scan the QR code coming up right here on your screen. That will take you to our Stay Connected page, where you can access all of our digital assets and digital platforms, including our coverage over the next 2 days as we connect with Senator Wyden, Senator Merkley, Representative Hoyle, and our entire federal delegation.